Welcome back. This is Jeff Byers, and this is NE 150, and this is Module 2, and this is Part 2 of my lecture on UV mapping. And what we did was kind of recap on what we did. We selected our object like this, and make sure we're in object mode up here. And we went to UV automatic mapping, and we unwrapped it, but it had a lot of seams. So I showed you a couple tools. I showed you how to go to UV shell to select the shells, and I showed you how to move those around, and I showed you how to go to edge mode and click on the edges and to see if they were in the right direction. I showed you how to do that. In the toolkit, I showed you how to rotate the UV shells under the transform section of the UV toolkit. And there's a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to show you how to use, but I'm not going to go over all of them because that would just confuse you. So I'm just going to go through the ones that you need to know right now to get through. And then as we go along from one project to the next, I'm going to show you more and more and more things and get more advanced. So right now we're just showing you the basics just to get going, to get the food can ready to go. So the next thing we're going to do is, once we get all those seams completely out except for just one in the back, and I showed you how that works. I also showed you how to cut and sew and move and sew together, and also showed you how to cut a seam. Okay, so we were able to cut the seam and put it where we wanted it. Okay. All right, now's the time where we need to pack, but we need to check some things. So let's go into this guy right here. This is kind of a checkerboard pattern that allows us to see any stretching or compression. Okay, anything that's stretching out or pushing in. Okay, so stretching and compressing. So how do we see this? Well, squares will let us see anything that's stretching or compressing. So if we look at these squares right here, you can see that these are square, but these are more rectangle. And so we're looking for those rectangles, anything that looks kind of odd, and we see stretching right here. So you can see that most of the shell looks good, most of the UVs look good, except for these areas right here. Well, how do we fix those? Okay, well, what we need to do when you're moving and sewing, let's go ahead and take that off. So in the UV texture editor, let's click off of that checkerboard, and which is a great tool, by the way. It tells you whether something's stretching or compressing. So another way to find out if something's stretching or compressing is this guy right here. Okay, so this tool right here, or this icon, allows us to see almost like a temperature chart. Anything red is stretching, anything blue is compressing. I think that's correct. Let's take a look. Rotate around here and see where that is. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in. Alright, so that mark right there, you can see I put that, and see that red? So between these two marks here is red, and that is stretching. So I was right. So anything blue is compressing, that's pushing in. Anything red is stretching. So how would you fix that? Well, you could go in here. I'm going to make this full screen. Zoom out a little bit. You can go in here and you can do it two ways. You can go in here and go to UVs, and you could take these UVs and move them out like that. See how the red's going away, and the more I push it together, the worse it gets. So I'm going to pull those out until it turns white. I can do that for all these areas, but you can see that's kind of time consuming and would take forever. And there's not much here. It's just a cylinder, so it's not going to hurt to do this. But can you imagine something that is really dense and very difficult to texture or to UV map? How terribly hard that would be to do it the way I showed you here. That's the manual way to do it, and we don't want to do that. That just takes too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a very quick and surefire way to get all those taken care of. So Let me go back into UV shell. Okay, and we're going to make this, bring this back again so we can see what's going on here. So how do we fix that? Well, there's another tool that's really great, and you got to be in your UV shell mode. Let's go ahead and turn that off, and let's turn this off. Okay, so we're back. We're kind of where we started. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go scroll down into unfold. You're going to see a unfold, and what we're going to do is we're going to click on that unfold. Okay. What that's going to do is that's going to unitize everything around. That's going to make everything equal. After I do that, you can see that if I click on the cube again, or the checker box, that if we look at the same area, it is completely fixed. Just like that, push of a button. Everything. What a wonderful tool. And I use that all the time to kind of get everything situated. So the idea is you got a lot of things to think about when you're UV mapping. Is when you lay out UVs, you have to make sure that you don't have any stretching or compression. So I'm going to turn that off a minute, and then I'm going to click on this guy right here, and notice that it's all white. And we're looking for all white when we click on this guy right here. Okay? All right. So this is the texture seams. Okay? And we can see if we have any squishing or stretching or compression, and then we've got our grid, our checkerboard that kind of helps us with visually seeing any stretching and compressing. Let's go look at the top part, and those look good too as well. So basically, we're all completely finished. Okay, but there's a couple other things we need to think about. Okay, we need to think about texture efficiency. Okay, let's turn that the grid off, the checkerboard off, and we need to pack. So efficiency basically means how much can we get out of this texture space. Okay, now you can see that it's kind of angled. When you unfold and you do unfold and maybe you do optimize, so always unfold first, and it's still kind of messy or doesn't look right, try optimize. Okay. And then there's another tool here. You can see it's kind of slanted. When I did unfold, it slanted it. So what I'm going to do is go arrange and layout, and I'm going to orient shells. Okay, click on orient shells, and now it's perfectly straight. And that's what we need for programs like Photoshop. The next thing is that we have to fit all our most of our UVs all into one texture space. Okay, if we were to work with just one texture space, which we're not, we're gonna break into UDIMs, which is tiling. But right now, for just the food can, I'm gonna show you just to kind of how to efficiently pack this as efficiently as possible. Okay. That means we don't want any anything outside of this UV space right here, this cube right here that you see. Okay, anything out is wasted space. Plus, you cannot in gaming, you cannot go outside of that workspace. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on the biggest piece that we have, and we're going to scale it so it fits within these 4 walls. Okay. So you just go in there and get it as close as you can. Okay, I always like to leave myself a little bit of room on either side. Okay, so if you get real close to it, you can see that I've got room here and I've got room over here, but that's still decent. That's okay. So now there's something I'm going to talk to you about, which is called texel density. It's right here. It's underneath the transform tool. And in texel density, it tells you basically how large your texture space is that you're using. So if I go in here and click on UV shell, click on the UV shell itself, I'm going to click on get. And it will tell you what your UV texture space scale is, 30.2583. Okay? Now if I click on this one right here, I'm going to go in here and get, and notice that it's smaller. We want the texel density to be the same. Basically, if you think about texel density, it kind of equates with resolution. Okay? The more texel density space that you have, the bigger the texel density is, the higher resolution you're able to give that object. So if we have a food can, and I'm going to do 4096 by 4096, okay? Let's say this texture space is 4096 by 4096. Then this will basically, if we cut this into 4, that'll be 2048 by 2048. So if we cut this in 4s, so if this was a 4096, so if I cut this in a square, the square right here would be 2048 by 2048. Okay? That's a pretty high resolution map for just a food can. Alright, so we're going to do, instead of 4096, which is industry standard, for a food can, we're just going to do 2048 by 2048. We don't need to do that much. So if we break that up into 4 pieces at 1024, that's still pretty high resolution for that little area there. But that also tells you that if I've got this little section here that's 1024, you can see that I'm marking it out here, that would be 1024, I would have to have a texture label at least 2048 wide to fit in there for the optimal resolution that I need, right? Because it's 2048 wide. Okay, I don't know what it is this way. It's almost like 1024. So I need to find a texture, okay, a label that's 2048 by 1024. That's going to be impossible to find on the internet. I'm not saying totally impossible. I'm just saying that's going to be really hard to find. Something that resolution, right? Because nothing's for free anymore, and they've pretty much locked the trying to find images on the internet, as you know. So let's get back to that. Now you know what texel density is and how you use it and why you use it, because we're trying to get the best resolution as we can, and the better we pack these, the better resolution we're going to have and the nicer looking textures we're going to have. So with this, okay, let's go click on here, and Maya makes it easy. Go to get, right, on that one, and then select both of these at the same time, and then click on set. There you go. There's not much change. They did change, but there's not much. And then what we're going to have here is the same texel density. So when I go click on this guy and click on get, it's 30.2583, and we're going to click on this guy right here and get, and it's the same thing, and we're going to click on that guy and click on get. We're good to go. So now we just need to go in here and move these around however you want. Just make sure you're not overlapping. So let's talk about that. Overlapping UVs. Okay, so for example, if we have a car and we're texture mapping the wheels, and the wheels are all the same texture, right? Let's say this is the outside of the wheel, and all 4 wheels look the same, right? If you look at your car, they should all look the same. If not, somebody probably stole your hubcaps and whatever. But the idea here is all the wheels are the same. So if something's exactly the same texture, right? If they're the same exact texture, why not overlap them? Well, why not? You can. So you would overlap those. Okay? Now, that would give you that gives you all that other space to put little pieces in here of your car, let's say, right? So you got thousands of pieces of your car. The idea now is, what the cool thing is, I hate to say it, used to be we were really worried about efficiency in gaming and texture space, because every time you would waste it, it could be thousands of dollars. I mean, thousands of dollars going right out the window, because any space that you waste in a gaming company equates to money lost because of the hard drive space that you're taking for all that extra texture space. So when I was working at Random Games, you had to pack this thing so good that you wouldn't have any space in there, meaning you would probably go in there and pack a bunch of stuff in this little area right here, and a bunch of stuff in this little area right here, and so on and so forth. So basically, wasted space equals money. Now the problem, the issue now is that there are no issues with UDIMs, because UDIMs is a different animal. It allows you to use an infinite number across and up. So you have 10 units across and you can go all the way up. And I've not gone above 900 of these UDIM tiles, I mean all these texture spaces. The thing is they figured out a way to make it so you could take this, and you still don't want to waste space, right? You still don't want to waste space, but you can do this and still go with a basically 2048 by 2048 and not use any more space in the game engine than if you were to go in here and pack everything into one. So if I had a really intricate object, I could have hundreds of these packed at 2048 and have a beautiful resolution model. Now can you imagine how small these UVs would have to be if I packed a big model into one little UV space? Very small. So they've pretty much broken that barrier of efficiency if you're using UDIMs. Now the downside to UDIMs right now is that there are not as many software companies and people are just, it's so new that people are just now using it. Believe me, it'll be the biggest thing. But right now, people are still packing in small little spaces, okay? And they're branching out into UDIMs. Now, in Unreal 5, the new game engine, you're going to see UDIMs and you're going to see it explode. And you're going to see everybody using UDIMs, okay? So I feel as an instructor I have to show you both. So this is packing in one tile, which is just regular texturing, regular UV mapping, and there's UDIM tiles that we're going to do in this course to get you prepared for what's going to happen in the industry very, very soon. It's your choice, but I prefer to do UDIMs because now I'm not so worried about being so picky about efficiency. We still want to be efficient and we still want to have texel density correct. So, but what I can do instead of packing, so let's say if I have a bunch of materials that are black, I want them in this UDIM tile. If I want steel, so how I pack with UDIMs, I think of materials. So this can only has two materials, right? It's the label and the steel. So with Substance Painter, I would pack it like this. Okay? Alright? And some of you would go, well, I could pack it like this. Yes, you can, because the top and the bottom. Now, instead of doing that by hand, right, you could select them both, right? And here's the tool for it. You can use this tool here, showing you more tools. You could go basically stack shelves. Boom! Does it for you automatically. So there's some great tools out here, all right, that you can use. And so that would be the top of the can. Now, because I want to just keep them separate, just because in case I want to put writing on the top and then something different on the bottom, then you have to have two separate. Now, if you do put them on top of each other, you're going to be stuck with that. And a lot of times I don't like to kind of I don't want to work my way into a corner and then wish I wouldn't have done that. So a lot of times I just don't stack objects for that reason. Okay. So I'm just going to put them over to the side in case, if I want to add another object in here. So another thing is if you had a bunch of these cans together and they needed different labels, then you could use UDIM tiling to fix, do all that too as well. So UDIM tiling, a lot of people are out there saying, well, for a small food can, it's kind of a waste, isn't it? Well, the idea is to get you used to it now, get you used to how it works. So you're more comfortable as we get closer to the end, where we're going to have insane pieces that we got to UV layout, and understanding it now is really important. And I've never gone back to single tiling and texture mapping anymore. Now that I've started using UDIMs, I know how to use them. And I'll show you how to use them efficiently, and you'll feel comfortable, and you'll probably never go back to, because you're so limited to one texture space. Okay? All right. So anyway, all right. So the downside to UDIMs. Okay, let's talk about that. So the downside, there are very few downsides. So the biggest downside is that it still sees this texture space as two different textures, right? Even though when you bring it into a game engine, it sees it as one texture. So, but with a program like Maya, it sees it as two separate textures, okay? But and that causes more memory, okay? So that means that I got a 2048 by 2048. So that means I've got something like 24 megabytes and 24 megabytes. So instead of just being 24 megabytes for a texture, I've got two texture maps that add up to 48 megabytes. So it used to be 24 megabytes or maybe 12. I can't remember. But in between those, it doesn't matter. It still tax on the megabytes. So if I have 10 of these, I have to do, if it's 24 megabytes per UDIM tile, I have to take 24 times 10, and that's how many megabytes it's going to take. So all of a sudden, you start seeing that if you don't have a lot of memory on your computer or on your hard drive, it can take a lot of space. Now, we're not too worried about this. 12 versus 24 megabytes, or 24 versus 48 megabytes. I think we can deal with that. But if you have 900 of these UDIM tiles times, the 24, that can really add up quickly. And some people, squawk about that. But I still think UDIM tiling is the best way to go, and it's the future. Now, with that said, a lot of yakking and a lot of talking here. I'm sorry about that, but I want you to feel comfortable with UDIM tiling, and it's nothing to be afraid of. You can see that the UV editor keeps snapping up there, and you notice that if you make that mistake, it's easy to get it back. Let's see, what did I do? If I can't even recreate it, but it keeps going up into there. Okay, so if that happens to you, all you have to do is just click on it, the tag, and bring it back down again. There we go. So in reality, I'm all finished UV mapping this, which is cool. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to save everything. Okay. And how to save it in UDIM tiles. Okay, that's really important, right? So we're not quite finished yet. Okay, the reason for that is that the texture doesn't go all the way to the top, meaning that we don't have a label that goes to the top. We have a label that just goes to this area right here. So we're not quite ready yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this up again. Okay. I'm going to right click and go to edge. I'm going to double click on this edge up here and this edge down here. Okay. What I'm going to do is go to cut and sew, and we're going to cut those areas. And we're going to do with that, we're going to go to each shell, and we're going to move that shell up, and we're going to move this shell down. Okay. These shells are going to go over here with the steel, with the tops. They're going to be made out of I don't know, a steel material, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to move these guys up here like that. We want to keep the same UD tiling. We're going to move these down together, closer down here. If you zoom in here, you can see that we still have the bottom, we still have the top, okay? And what's going to happen is when I bring this UV tile into Substance Painter, it's going to see it as a material of steel. If I add steel material to it, which is going to be cool. And then this is just going to be our label, which we haven't changed. We just took these pieces off and put them over here. So now we're all set. Now we're good. All right, so let's go back to UV shell, and let's go ahead and get this minimized again. There we go. So what we need to do to save this is we're going to have to right click over this. We're going to have to go to selection. We're going to have to go into this object mode up here. Okay. We can see that we've got basic seams, but we have to for our label, and so those seams are okay. That's okay. That's gonna happen. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to this guy right here. It's the camera. Okay, so click on this icon, camera. Okay, with this object as in selection mode. If you're in face mode, it won't work. In component mode, that's what they call component mode. If I go back into selection mode, make sure that's objects on, and then we can go in here and take a snapshot. So click on that. That's a snapshot. Which file format do we want? Well, Unreal uses Targa, but we're going to use JPEG just to save space. Okay. We're not going to do 4096. That is industry standard, but this is such a small object. I just hate wasting space. So let's do 2048 by 2048. And in here you can see area settings. This is really crucial. Okay, U meaning this way. U, we have 2 UDIM tiles, so we need to type in 2 on this. So 2. And then we have 1 UDIM tile going up, right? So 1 to 2. So 2 across and then 1 on top, and we click up here. So we need to go into browse. We need to tell it where to go. Well, if you set your project like I did, I'm telling it to go to this directory here. Okay, you need to do the same and make sure you manage your folders. And I'm just going into the images folder. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to type in food can, right? Food can. And we're going to type in UDIM, okay, UDIM, and we're going to type in UV. Okay, so that basically saying it's our food can, and it's basically UDIM tiled, and it's UV space. So I'm going to click on Save. Okay, I'm going to click on Apply and Close, and what it did was it wrote out 2 of these, okay, that are connected together that will be used. Okay. So think of UDIMs as material spaces to place your materials. So if you have a character, let's say, and you have belts, that would be a separate material. So you put all the materials that would share that, all those objects or UVs that would share that material would be placed in here. And then you have the face. Then the face has a material that's put here. Then you have, let's say, maybe his eyeglasses or a tie or a backpack. Any material that's shared, you would put it in that spot. So you've got to kind of think ahead when you're using UDIMs too, on how you're going to separate everything, and as far as materials. And that's kind of how I think. I separate my UVs as materials, and it works great. I love it. So with that done, your UV mapped, you're done. What you need to do now is you need to save your work. So save scene as. And we're going to type in 7 here, at least I am, UV mapping. And I'm going to put UDIM in here, just kind of UDIM and underscore, and save. Alright, so after I save, then once you save your work, you've got your UV maps done. So everything's good to go. And now we need to get prepped to bring everything into Substance Painter. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. That'll be part 3, and I'll see you there.